In this video, I'm going to be responding to a video entitled, "I Hate Odd Lifts, But Should I?" by Alexander Bromley. And as the title suggests, this is not an entirely positive take on odd lifting. He's not coming up here and patting us on the back and saying what you're doing is amazing, keep doing it, right? But what it is actually, a reasonable, we could say, critique. He brings up a lot of points that are, in some cases, quite valid. In some cases, maybe understandable, but I disagree. But either way, he's doing a good job of resisting the urge to just say, these damn kids and their damn Zerchers, back in my day, we only did 3 lifts. He's not doing any of that. He's, aware of his own biases, very self-aware, and ultimately made a, good video with a fair amount of nuance. And he's certainly not just coming out and kicking sand in our faces. And ultimately, I think it's a video that anybody who is interested in odd lifts should watch. Not that I necessarily agree with everything, but I think every point that he brings up is one that you should listen to and make sure that you have an answer for yourself. And if anything that he is saying that might be critical, you don't have a good answer for, look into that, right? I do feel like I'm confident in my answers to the points that he brings up, but nevertheless, they're worth addressing. Just like anything, you don't get stronger by just hiding from criticism. You get stronger by inviting it, seeing what's valid, changing those things, and then just formulating responses, or maybe sharing your perspective to explain in cases where the criticisms are not as valid. And ultimately, I think it's a positive thing for odd lifting, old time lifts, what have you, that it's getting attention from people that are not actually into that yet. That's how we're ultimately going to spread more, but also, refine the ideas, see what's good and what's not. It's good to have a fresh set of eyes, looking at what we do. And like I say, he brings up some valid points. And so I'm going to share my perspective. This is only my perspective. I'm obviously not everyone who uses the odd lifts uses them for the same reasons. My perspective is deeply rooted in history. I'm looking at this, also seeing a past where a lot of these lifts were actually quite common, a past where in fact the term odd lift was originally used to describe what what we now call powerlifting, the big 3, oddly enough. So things go full circle there. And my perspective is also deeply rooted in practicality. Well, obviously I love doing fun, weird stuff. I mean, that's great. What I spend most of my time on is things that I actually find practical value in, and I do think there is tremendous practical value and potential in a lot of these lifts that could be described as odd lifts. Maybe not so much in others, but I'm mostly interested in the ones that I think are practical developmental value. So that's my perspective. Again, there are other people that have separate perspectives. They're free to share theirs as well, but I was mentioned in this video, so I'll go ahead and give my perspective. I'm going to be splicing in various clips and responding directly to them. That's why I'm doing this on YouTube instead of on Instagram. I'm a much better writer than I am a video editor. Just doing this video out in the rain, partially because my kids are going to sleep and I don't want to wake them up, but also just because I like the rain. We don't get a lot in SoCal, so it's nice to be out here. But anyway, I'll start splicing in segments of his video and then reacting to those.
Atlas Power Shrug also writes really thoughtful bits on his training views, which range from inspirational to thought-provoking. And he's damn strong. Here he is doing a one-arm Zercher clean, an apparent tribute to man-giant Tom Haviland with 265 pounds. This lift makes me cringe. It makes me say, why? There's no obvious physical benefit other than showing people what weird shit you can do with your strength, and there's very real risk that is far beyond that of traditional strength training movements. The math of risk to reward seems pretty damn obvious here.
First of all, thank you for your kind words. I'm at the point where I am starting to appreciate compliments on my writing, if anything more so than on my lifting, so I really appreciate that. Thank you. On the Zercher cleans, for me, it's just a bit of fun. It was a tribute to Tom Haviland, but it was a fun thing to do, right? In the odd lifts, you have lifts that could be considered more stunts or tricks, things of that nature, essentially just intended to entertain and be fun, right? And then you also have what might be considered developmental tools, lifts that are designed to actually build some capability, your muscle strength, etc., right? And it's not always clear from the outside which is which, and in fact, the same lift might just be a fun stunt for one person, but might actually serve a valuable developmental purpose for another, and you can't always tell from the outside which is which. To illustrate that point, Tom Haviland recently posted on Instagram about why he does Zercher cleans in his training, and his reasoning made sense. It's actually a valuable tool for him, and there's a reason why he does cleans that way instead of in the more normal way. So it actually makes sense in the context of his training, and it's valuable for his own personal development, whereas it's just kind of a piece of fun for me and some of the other people that have been doing it, right? As a personal example for me, I don't know if you've seen my Kelly snatches. That's the behind the back snatch where, I'm fully bent over, catching the bar behind my back. That looks crazy, right? But there was actually a period where I was doing those before all my pressing workouts, because it really helped to warm up my shoulders and keep my shoulders happy. So, it was actually serving a valuable purpose for me. And I think it's actually, developed some of my back as well too. But bottom line, something that looks completely strange. And in fact, when I first tried it, I thought it was just for fun. I thought it was just a crazy thing I was doing for fun. It actually had some value for me. So, it's really hard to judge exactly what you're seeing, from the outside without seeing the rationale. But yes, the one-arm Zercher cleans for me are just for fun. And you compared it, the danger of the one-arm Zercher clean to traditional lifts. Perhaps if you're considering squat, bench, and deadlift traditional lifts, maybe it's a little bit more dangerous, although, no one's going to be using, 600 pounds on the one-arm Zercher clean. And, a lot of accidents can happen with very heavy weights. But anyway, there's an older tradition where one-arm cleans were actually quite common. One-arm cleans all the way to the shoulder. Quite a few people cleaned close to, or in one case that I'm aware of, over 300 pounds one-handed all the way to the shoulder. So, if you go back a little bit further, that is traditional lifting. So, I haven't heard of any injuries happening from that. But we don't have a whole lot of records from that time, so I'm sure something happened. But, more so than today, I don't know about that. They were doing crazier things, certainly, but with less weight. Now we're doing safer things with more weight, so which one's more dangerous? Who knows? But let's move on.
I can't help but feel that this type of work just appeals to the need of the lifter to stand out, to look different, to feel exceptional, despite not really being so.
This is a part of the video that I think anybody who's interested in odd lifts should definitely watch and try to have an answer for, because honestly what he's saying here is true, but there's a positive connotation to it as well, and I think the way he's saying it is more negative. You see, this statement applies to me fairly well. I'm not exceptionally strong. I'm not saying I'm a 95-pound weakling, but I'm definitely not one of these people that's got 9-inch wrists, just built different, right? I might be maybe above average in terms of strength potential, or maybe more accurately, I'm good at some things, not as good at others, I think, as most of us are, right? Nevertheless, I've managed to develop a reputation for strength via the odd lifts. Now, is that just because, I'm doing different things no one's ever seen before, so the, pure novelty factor is what's making me get this reputation? I mean, probably to a certain extent, but I think, enough people have tried some of the things that I'm doing to know that it really does require strength, and there's, something going on here that's not simply doing something new, right? So what exactly is going on here? The odd lifts, what the old lifts have allowed me to do, is to maximize my capabilities within my overall strength ceiling, within my overall physical capabilities, rather than transcend my limitations. So if, for example, I was to take steroids, my overall strength ceiling would just dramatically increase. I would have more muscle and just more overall physical power, right? And I haven't done that. What I've done instead is maximize what I can do, with the physical power that I have, as well as, developing it in some ways that are not usually developed. So let me give you a concrete example to help that make sense, because it probably doesn't make sense right now. One of the feats people are most impressed by of mine is my 500-pound one-hand deadlift. And, people will say, what, can you deadlift 1,000 pounds with two hands? Well, no, not at all. My conventional deadlift is actually not that impressive, 600 pounds, right? Nothing to write home about whatsoever. But in all reality, you don't have to have that much more overall physical power to deadlift 500 pounds with one hand and two, because, most of the body can still be brought into play with just one hand, The difference is you have to have much stronger connective tissue, tendons, ligaments, things of that nature, which have to be developed slowly over time, as well as, muscles in various areas of your core, your upper back, etc., in order to fight against the awkward, off balance load, and just, effectively transmit all that force into the bar. So you have to have a different kind of strength to do that, and I would say that strength is actually rarer than the strength to have a massive conventional deadlift. There are far more people that, can two-hand deadlift massively more than I can, than who can do a one-arm deadlift of 500 pounds without straps, even though that one-arm deadlift overall requires less physical power output. Does that make sense? If you compare me to anyone else who has a conventional max of 600, the overall physical power, if we call that a representation of my overall physical power, okay, I might have the same overall physical power as somebody else who can deadlift 600 pounds conventionally, right? But I can do so much more with it. I can search squat 500 for reps. I can one-arm searcher, 335. I can one-hand deadlift 500 pounds. I can hop, a 405-pound bar up my back. There's just a lot more capabilities that I've built within, and none of those things requires like a greater amount of overall physical power, but they do involve, I guess you could say, fortifying various areas in the body in order to allow those things, and just developing different muscles that aren't normally brought into play so strongly, with the conventional lifts, to strengthen and fortify some of those activities. Does that make sense? So yes, the odd lifts allowed a relatively unexceptional lifter, me, to stand out and appear more exceptional than he really is. However, that happened because I trained them extensively for years, developed capabilities I didn't have before, strength that I didn't have before, muscle that I didn't have before, and gained the ability to do things that genuinely very few people can do. So in a way, that appearance did become reality. And I'm being a little bit flippant here, but I really mean it. I'm not exceptional when compared to people that are genuinely just super talented in terms of strength, and I'm not that exceptional in terms of overall strength in comparison to more serious strength athletes that are taking performance enhancing drugs. I mean, my overall strength doesn't stack up compared to them. So in that sense, no, I'm not that exceptional. But on the other hand, you probably have more examples of the latter, serious strength athletes who are on performance enhancing drugs and have enormous strength, than you have of maybe more regular folks who have come a little bit closer to actually maximizing their own potential within their limitations. And I say come a little bit closer because I'm nowhere near maximizing my potential within my limitations. What does actually maximizing your capabilities within your limitations look like? I'm going to give you an example from the early 1900s, because the lifting style of that era was designed to do exactly that. Maximize the capabilities of someone within their own limitations, because there were no steroids at the time to take and just get massively stronger overall. You had to maximize your capabilities, within your overall physical limitations. And they designed a training style designed to do exactly that. These strongmen wanted to, show off for audiences, have the most impressive performances possible, as well as compete against one another for the title of strongest man in the world, or, what have you. And to do that, they developed a number of lifts, some of which were showy stunts, like we talked about earlier, to impress and just show off in a fun way. And some of them were developmental exercises, and many of them, in fact, probably most of them, could perform double duty as each. They could be used to impress, but they could also be used to develop. And these guys developed incredible physical capabilities that they could then show off in, very impressive stunts. And I'm going to give you one example, because I think it shows, again, what someone who may not have tremendous overall physical power, maybe somebody who couldn't necessarily deadlift 900 or 800 pounds, can do, with some attention to tendon strength, mobility, skill, quickness, etc., and just really good overall physical development of a natural man. The stunt that I want to talk about now is Charles Rigoleau. I don't know how to pronounce the French name, I'm sorry. Maybe Natural Hypertrophy can correct me, but we'll call him Charles. Anyway, a French weightlifter who one hand barbell snatched 253 pounds. Just one clean motion all the way overhead, 253 pounds. Now, that requires obviously enormous tendon strength, to withstand all that rapid acceleration, all through the hand, the arm. It requires, of course, enormous mobility in order to be able to drop down into the receiving position, which was basically a full one-arm overhead squat, just with the lightning quickness necessary for that lift. And then obviously it required a lot of muscular power too. But again, not necessarily, I don't know that this guy could necessarily have deadlifted, 800 pounds. I'm sure he could deadlift at least, maybe six or seven, but, he didn't necessarily have any more overall physical strength than today's strength athletes. In fact, in some ways, he probably had substantially less than a lot of today's successful strength athletes. But nevertheless, no one, even in the steroid era, has been able to accomplish a 253-pound one-hand snatch. And it has been tried. I know a big Russian, as well as some others, have tried. I'm sure, if enough people tried it, of course, any record would fall. But, that's just an example of, what can be incredible feats can be done within, fairly ordinary human limitations. And obviously, Rigolo was, I hope I'm saying that right, was an incredibly talented lifter, but I don't think he's one of a kind. And you had plenty of more average people who were putting up more average numbers that would still be incredible by today's standards. I mean, there were plenty of guys snatching 200 pounds one-handed. I mean, how often do you see that today? That would, greatly impress most people today, but it was fairly common at that time because while lifting wasn't as popular in that era, I think the average lifter might have been a little bit more of a hardcore enthusiast than today. And a lot of their capabilities were just, very, very impressive, especially if you consider that some of them were just ordinary folks, And again, the older era of lifting, it had the showy stunts, but it also had a much wider variety of lifts that could be developed, or that could be used to develop, I guess, a broader array of capabilities than just, pressing something off your chest, picking something up to waist height, or squatting down with it. They were doing Turkish get-ups. They were doing bent press, which is a one-hand lift where you lift a weight overhead one-handed by lowering under it using the power of your lats, obliques, shoulders, etc., to get under the weight and standing up with it. I mean, the best numbers on that, I believe Arthur Saxon did like 370, a 370-pound one-hand overhead lift. And this is a guy who weighs about 200 pounds. I seriously doubt he could deadlift more than 700 pounds, or if you put him on a bench, I seriously doubt he would have been able to bench press 500 pounds. So, again, he was exceptionally strong, but still within limitations that would be considered, fairly unexceptionable by modern standards, he was able to do incredibly exceptional things. And again, this is a record that no one has bested in, all the years since it was accomplished, despite the advent of performance-enhancing drugs. So I rambled a little bit there, but this is something that I'm passionate about. I do think the older style of lifting, which, today would be considered odd lifting, and, this continued right up into the 50s, the what's called the silver era of bodybuilding. This style, I think, was designed to more fully develop, the unenhanced human potential, strength potential, maybe than the training styles that we see now. So, yeah, I mean, I see myself as, coming from a training style designed to, make unexceptional people in some ways seem exceptional and in fact be exceptional. I'm a little carried away talking about old school lifting, as I have a tendency to do. But before I move on, I did want to circle back around Bromley's point about using odd lifts to seem more exceptional than you really are. You know, there's something to it, and it's definitely a temptation to be aware of. People do this. We've seen it. I think it's probably more of a temptation with odd lifts that might allow you to use more weight than maybe the conventional variant would. Maybe some sort of a partial. So, you know, with these lifts, it's important to be extra cautious that you don't just kind of delude yourself and others into thinking you're stronger than you are by using more weight. I do think it's going to be less of a temptation with odd lifts that might allow you to use less weight than what the conventional variant might be. For example, a Zercher deadlift instead of a conventional deadlift. I mean, if you're making it harder on yourself and using less weight, it's a little bit harder to fall into that temptation. But it totally is a valid thing to keep in mind. I've seen people do this. It is a real thing. Watch what he said, listen to what he said, and make sure that you don't fall victim to it. Yeah, definitely.
The defense usually looks something like this. I like to do hard things. I like to push the envelope. I like to see what my body can handle.
Yeah, no, that's not my reason for this at all. In fact, it's a major pet peeve of mine in the fitness industry, this emphasis on, doing hard things for their own sake, just doing things that suck just because they suck to build, I guess, willpower or something, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, people getting in the cold water, waking up at 4 a.m., just doing all this stuff just to show how dedicated and hardcore they are. And, what is it actually going to do? I mean, maybe there's some benefits to the cold water thing, I don't know, but I mean, if that's what you're doing, I hope that you are squared away in your training, because there's so much you could be doing in terms of exercise that will actually provide tangible benefits down the road. I hope you're doing all of that if you're getting in the cold water, if you're wasting all your valuable psych up getting ice water, because I guarantee you, if you psych yourself up, do some mobility work, do some hardcore bodybuilding, some tendon strength, what have you, you'll see benefits down the road. And to me, a lot of the value of the odd lifts is they provide ways to train those three things in ways that the conventional lifts just don't. I mean, using conventional lifts, how are you going to replicate the bodybuilding, mobility, or resilience benefits of, say, a Zercher deadlift or a Jefferson curl? I mean, there's really nothing. I guess maybe you could get a lot of the same things with Atlas stones, but I mean, how many people actually have giant concrete circles just sitting around the gym? Not too many, right? Look, the conventional lifts are great, but they don't do everything, and the odd lifts help to plug those holes. And while they can be used for fun, and they can be a lot of fun, that's all well and good, you can do a whole lot of productive training with them without ever doing anything difficult just for difficulty's sake. And like I say, I'm right there with you. A lot of people are doing too much that's just difficult for difficulty's sake, fun runs, cold plungers, things of that nature. Odd lifts, at least a lot of the ones that I use, provide opportunities to do something that is maybe difficult, that is actually going to give you something in the long run, be that mobility, muscle in an area that maybe you didn't develop as well with the conventional lifts, maybe some tendon strength, something of that nature. I mean, with a lot of this stuff, you will see tangible benefits down the line. That's why I'm promoting them.
Don't get me wrong, I am firmly on the anti-fragile train, but I'm not sure that this is always that. Anti-fragile refers to things that do not simply resist stress, but actually grow and get stronger from it. The implication of the term is that there is a net positive from the pressure being applied, so that what doesn't kill you actually does make you stronger.
I'm really glad you brought up the term anti-fragile. I hadn't read that book in over a decade, so I'd totally forgotten the term, but that's actually the perfect description for my experience with discovering the odd lifts. Like many people, I was forced to start training at home with limited weights when the thing that I'm not going to mention happened, the thing that made people stop going to the gym for a while, that thing. And it was a big disruption to me. I hated not going to the gym because I was, locked into the, squat, bench, and deadlift routine. That was just what I did. But ultimately, that disruption broke me out of my mediocrity and made me find a much better way of training. And while there was an adjustment period, I quickly learned that these lifts are actually helping me out in a lot of ways more than the ones that I was so emotionally attached to at the gym were. So yeah, my discovery of these things was totally an example of anti-fragility. Thank you for bringing that up.
For every Atlas Power Shrugged, for every strong, thoughtful, progress-driven character dedicating himself to improvement, there is the random, manic, attention-seeking fuckery of a Tim Sowards or a Mikey Maybeam.
Look, while I appreciate that you keep saying nice things about me, I think this is where some of the innate extra grumpiness is coming out. I gotta defend my boy Mikey. He did nothing wrong. I was wearing a shirt earlier, but this filming took multiple days, so now it's in the laundry. But I'm still wearing the Mikey shirt with him deadlifting on a skateboard in spirit. Mikey did nothing wrong. Thanks for the shirt. Listen, my brother in Christ, you compete in a sport where they flip the shells of cars with the engines taken out to get attention. They do all sorts of things. If you look at World's Strongest Man, they always have some kind of zany contraption invented by Rogue or what have you. You guys do all sorts of things just for attention. And yes, it's an amazing athletic display, but so is a lot of the stuff Mikey does. I mean, you got to admit, he's a hell of an athlete. I mean, doing kick flips with a bunch of weight on his back. Have you seen him do the broomstick challenge? That's where you like stick a broom between your elbows so you can't move and get up off the floor face down. I'll link it in here. I don't care who you are, that's athletic. Would you want to wrestle a guy like that? So obviously he's not out here saying like this is what you need to do to get strong and capable. But as far as just being entertaining, which is what honestly strongman competition is all about, because that's what's different between strongman and powerlifting. That's why people actually watch strongman rather on occasion, and nobody, not even powerlifters, wants to watch powerlifting. I mean, it's intended to be entertaining. A lot of the old traditions that I follow, a lot of that was intended to entertain audiences. Modern strongman, they do cool stuff that's supposed to entertain audiences. I mean, if you look at like 70s strongman, didn't they have like giant beach balls they were pushing around on the beach and stuff? And I remember seeing all kind of wacky stuff from those days. So yeah, it's about being entertaining and displaying athleticism, and Mikey has athleticism in spades. I mean, if he was just doing weird stuff for weird stuff's sake, you could say one thing, but I mean, whether it's deadlifting 800 pounds behind his back, doing kick flips with like 300 pounds on his back, just doing insane feats of mobility like a 225 pound broomstick challenge, this guy is an athlete. And you know, I hope a lot of people don't think, okay, let me just, you know, do Jefferson lifts on a skateboard and that's how I'm going to get like this. But it's just like a demonstration of what you can aspire to if you train a bunch of different modalities and become both strong and athletic. I mean, I think it's great. So I think this is where some of the biases are coming out, and where, you know, maybe ideally a retraction needs to be issued, because I think you're unfairly hostile to Mikey when, you know, he's just showing off fantastic athleticism. And again, you are out there giving out good information, just like I'm trying to give good information on my end. But does every modern strongman competitor devote his YouTube channel to just putting out useful information to help people? No. Plenty of them are just showing off their capabilities as athletes, and that's fine. You know, you're going to have some people doing odd lifts who do try to present more information, but you're also going to have some that are just pure athletes. And I mean, Ike's a damn good athlete. You know, I can't do half the stuff he does, and I think very, very few people on the planet could, you know?
As someone who has had a dozen low back injuries from trying to support challenging loads in a rounded position, injuries which sidelined my competitive career for over a decade, I look at this approach with a heap of skepticism. No doubt their backs are strong to support these activities, but I can't help but wonder whether they are the exceptions or the rule. If a million athletes committed to a brand new Zercher deadlift federation, or to regularly maxing on the Jefferson curl, and if they used monkey fuckers as a staple accessory exercise, would we see in this population the realization of true spine strength potential that the rest of us have been missing? Or would injury rates increase fivefold? Part of me thinks that it might just be an outright wash, and that I really am just a grouchy, malcontented pot calling the kettle black. Maybe it is just pick your poison, because every mode of training, every exercise is going to grow and develop you in the same proportion that it's going to deteriorate you.
This is a really cool thought experiment that you bring up, and I think I can speak fairly confidently as to the outcome, even though we haven't actually tried it. I tend to think that, like you say, it would probably be a wash in terms of injury rates if people started competing on 1 rep max Jefferson curls and Zercher deadlifts instead of the conventional lifts. My experience has been that it's more about how you treat a lift than what the lift is. Any lift that you obsessively try to increase your 1 rep max on, the way a lot of people treat the big three, you're probably going to ultimately get injured if you just get excessively focused on any one lift, do it too long, neglect other areas, and that would certainly hold true for Zercher deadlifts and Jefferson curls. So I do tend to think it would be something of a wash in that case. However, that's not really what I advocate for. I always tell people on Jefferson curls, start extremely light, start with the empty bar, focus on quality reps, work up slowly, use it as a developmental tool. If you look way back in my Instagram, you'll see one of my first, I think my first post on Jefferson curls is literally entitled "Start with the Empty Bar," and that's what I practiced. And I actually got good results out of the empty bar for quite some time. Working up very slowly, adding 5-pound plates, 10-pound plates. It took me a while to ever get up to 135. And sure, I like to push the envelope, do some pretty heavy singles, but I've never really advocated that anyone else do that. And I think a lot of people can get a lot of really good training with fairly moderate weights and no real need to ever do 1 rep maxes on those. So I can tell you fairly confidently that if people treat it as a training lift, that they're using, moderate, reasonable weights, working up very slowly, not really pushing the envelope, injury rates are going to go down. I'm very confident that if people are using weights appropriate to them and, not pushing it like I am, like doing what I say, not what I do necessarily, injury rates are going to go down. You can use less than the empty bar. My mom, who's in her 70s, is going to come over in a couple weeks, and I'm going to show her how to do Jefferson curls using a 2.5-pound plate. You can go, it's literally just a forward fold, so you can do it unweighted if you want. You can use very tiny weights, whatever is suited to your range, to your strength and range. You can go as far down as you want. You don't have to go to extreme lengths if your mobility doesn't allow that now, but it'll allow you to gradually increase your range. So yeah, if more people are doing that, I think injury rates are absolutely going to go down. But if people are treating it as an ego lift, then obviously, people are going to get injured. On the Zercher deadlift, I've always said don't do Zercher deadlifts if you can't get into that position, into the start position easily without really pulling yourself. A lot of people, including myself back in the day, don't have enough mobility to actually get all the way down there. You can work on that through the Jefferson curl or the monkey fuckers. Both of those help with the mobility. So ultimately, if you build more range that you can move around in, you're less likely to get injured when you get into weird positions. And yeah, if you're using all of these responsibly as developmental tools and not really pushing the envelope, I think injury rates are absolutely going to go down, and that's what I advocate for. But obviously, I don't always practice that in my own life. I like to push the envelope. I like to 1 rep max, and there are going to be some people that are going to follow my lead, and they're going to want to just push the envelope too, and that's fine. But if we go with some mix of the two, mostly people are just using this as a developmental tool, but maybe some people, such as myself, max out occasionally. I think the net result on lifting culture is still going to be a significant decrease in back injuries and a significant increase in just health and ability. So that's my take on that. But yeah, if everyone did just suddenly switch from maxing out on the power lifts to maxing out on Zercher deadlifts, yeah, people are going to get injured. But I really do think that is the case with any lift. And I think, honestly, spreading out your ego lifting over a wider variety of lifts at least keeps you from obsessively focusing on the same lift over and over again and beating that area down until something pops. So, if we just, increase the variety in our ego lifts, at least we're giving, certain tissues a break while we overstress the other tissues. So, overall, I think we're going to have a net positive effect as these lifts become more prominent.
Fucking loves what he does. His joy in his daily parking lot antics bleeds through every clip he films, every post he writes, every nonsense toe curling PR that he hits. If Juji Mufu doing backflips in between sets of bazooka lifts inspires awe, excitement, and wonder in the rest of the world, I'm having an increasingly difficult time using my chronic cynicism to argue against it. And if it potentially encourages a hesitant couch potato to put on some jeans, take off their shirt, and go lift in the parking lot, then all the better.
So, hey, once again, thank you. If the way that I'm portraying this stuff is making someone who is inherently a little bit cynical towards it, at least stay open-minded towards it having some value, that's really cool. Very, very little of this stuff is my own invention. I didn't rediscover most of this stuff myself. A lot of people have been doing it. I'm certainly not the best odd lifter or old style lifter operating today, but if the way that I'm posting, is able to show people that might be inherently cynical towards the style of lifting that there's some value to it, I'm honored to have that role. So once again, I really appreciate all the compliments about, I guess, the way that I'm communicating this stuff. I do have to say, I wouldn't have the same passion that I have for it if I didn't see the developmental value. So, I mean, while there's definitely an inspirational quality to it, it's cool to see people doing crazy feats. I mean, Juji Mufu's been an inspiration for, decades. I remember seeing him back in the day when he was skinny and dressed up as a banana doing flips, Not skinny, he had a good body, but compared to him now, he was much smaller. But there's definitely value in that kind of inspiration, but in a lot of this stuff there is also developmental value, so that's something that I want to emphasize. Like I said before, I think constructive criticism of odd lifting is ultimately helpful to us, so I do appreciate you taking the time to provide that. There are definitely some pitfalls that we need to avoid, among those being emphasizing just fun attention-getting stunts that don't have a whole lot of developmental value over the developmental exercises. Now, obviously, we want to have fun. We want to motivate ourselves going to the gym. So there's certainly a place for just doing fun stuff for the sake of fun. But ultimately, what's going to make us happier in the long run is if we actually develop abilities that we can take home with us, muscle that we can take home with us. So we need to definitely keep that in mind. I do think that's something that there's potential for in, pretty much any form of exercise. We see with, power lifters, they shorten the ROM on their benches, on their sumo deadlifts in pursuit of bigger numbers, and kind of sacrifice a lot of the developmental benefits of those exercises. I'm sure you can find examples elsewhere, but it's certainly something that's kind of uniquely a temptation with odd lifts because it's just kind of coloring outside the lines. There are no rules. So it is something that we have to be mindful of. And certainly I think there are a lot of newer lifters that shouldn't get too caught up in displays of strength and, should probably be more focused on progression with exercises that they can repeat week after week instead of chasing novelty. Does that mean that they have to stick to just the big three? No, there's plenty of these exercises that I think can be implemented from day one. In some of the old textbooks, like Alan Calvert's Super Strength from like 1923 or whatever, Jefferson curls were actually recommended for flat-out beginners. The thinking at that time was that Jefferson curls with a light weight, I think Calvert recommended a 15-pound dumbbell, would help to prepare the spine for heavier lifts done later. So he wanted you to start doing 15-pound Jefferson curls so that your spine would be prepared for deadlifts later. So I think there is definitely something here for people of all levels, but yeah, a lot of these beginners and intermediates definitely don't need to get too caught up in the novelty, right? Ultimately, I think the fact that the odd lifts are now getting some criticism is a good thing because it means that they are getting outside of an echo chamber that is predisposed to say positive things about them. And in this case, it's, fair, nuanced criticism that anyone interested in the odd lifts should actually keep in mind. I think that's nothing but positive. Thanks for watching if you made it this far. I know I have a tendency to ramble, but I think there was a lot of good stuff here. This is an important conversation to have, so feel free to leave a comment. I'll try to actually respond on this platform, even though I know I've kind of neglected my YouTube, but I will try to respond to comments on this one, and I just appreciate them for the algorithm. I don't have nearly as much reach on this platform. I just felt that YouTube was the appropriate venue so that I could just splice in, Bromley's video with mine so that I could show what I was reacting to. I much prefer text, but it just wouldn't work for this. So anyway, just feel free to leave a comment. I'll actually get back to them on this one. At least I'll try sometime within the week. And yeah, feel free to share with your friends or anybody that you know that is interested in odd lifts. Once again, thanks for watching.